Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another live stream with me, Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, reading our book, I Saw Two Englands by H.V. Morton. And sorry about the stream having to I don't know why it does that. It just, you have it already, you get all prepared, and then you start streaming and it just says, sorry, it's not working. You've got to restart. It's very frustrating, but anyway, here we are. We are actually here, and it is working now, so that's the main thing. And hello to the lovely Julia, hello to Adrian, hello to Michael Angel. Apologies to anybody else who's having issues, and or tissues, of course, issues and tissues and sparacus veins. We are reading H.M. Morton, and can't remember where we were now. Just going to see how far we've got. We're on page 99 already. Huh. Nearly halfway through. Nearly, but not quite. Yeah, Linda, we did have some problems. It's just on the opening. I don't know why. As soon as I initiate the stream, it crashes something. It just catches it almost like it's caught its leg in the mechanics and screams, "Stop the machine! Stop! Reset!" Right, we are still running around Sussex, I think, with our friendly historian in 1939. Hope you're all well. Nearly halfway, nearly halfway. Isn't it amazing? This is the third book as well. I can't believe, I'm finding it hard to believe that we read all of English Journey and Narrowboat, and we're halfway through this one. It seems absolutely amazing. Linda Kane says, I'm on page 117. Oh, yeah, well, you've got more words. YouTube seems quite buggy since the lockdown. Yes, I think so. I think we'll forgive them because it is free after all. Ed Loud waves loudly. Oh, blimey. Not too loud, I hope. Here we go, then. In the quiet lanes about 3 miles south of Fittleworth, a cottage stands by itself near the village of Bignor. 3 miles south of... Oh, yes, I know what you mean. I knocked at the door and asked if I could see the Roman villa. A pleasant, smiling woman gave me a ticket and removed a bunch of keys from a hook, and we crossed the lane and mounted a rising path that ran on the edge of a wheat field. When we had walked 100 yards or so, the woman turned round and pointed with the keys towards the way we had come. The landscape is dominated by the South Downs, whose smooth northern slopes descend in gentle sweeps to the fields and the meadows of the Rother Valley. "There's Staines Street," she said. "Can you see it coming down towards us?" As I saw, like a straight line drawn in apple green among the darkened emerald of the downs, the ghost of the great Roman road that once joined Regnum, which is now Chichester, with the port on the Thames called Londonium. We turned and went on beside a field of wheat. The Roman villa we were approaching was discovered by a ploughman in the year of 1811. His ploughshare struck something large and hard, which turned out to be a coloured pavement. As he scraped away the soil, Granny Mead, born Godwoods in an eagle's claws, looked about him out of the Sussex mire. Being a Saxon, the man did not recognise him, and ran off to ask Mr. Tupper, the farmer, to come and have a look. Oh, I see. That's the mosaic, isn't it? Then came the discovery of more coloured pavements, of living rooms and reception rooms, of centrally heated or baths, bedrooms, barns, stables and outhouses. It was one of the 3 finest Roman villas in England, as fine as the Woodchester Villa in Gloucestershire and the villa at Brading in the Isle of Wight. Experts think that it was built about AD 79, the year that the year that I want to say that, but he's put the year the Emperor Vespasian died. When we came to the highest part of the path, we saw a tall yew tree ahead of us, standing like a sentinel at the entrance to a group of thatched barns. The barns have been built over the pavements to save them from the weather, said the woman. I thought that a more convincing Saxon village. What? I thought that a more convincing Saxon village could not have been constructed, though a curious barbaric covering for such a Roman elegance. We went round the unlocking doors and unpadlocking wooden shutters, and through each open door and shutter shot a beam of light which streamed down onto the coloured mosaic pavements. The pavements of 7 rooms had been preserved in a fragmentary condition, but all the fragments are large enough to give a good idea of the complete design. It was interesting to see patterns which I had seen in Pompeii and Herculaneum and in more remote places of the Roman Empire, lying in a Sussex meadow. One pattern seems to have been a monotonously popular one with Roman artists. It must have occupied the place in the Roman interior decoration that the monarch of the Glen occupied in Victorian dining rooms. This is the 4 Seasons, a geometrical design with allegorical heads in the 4 corners representing the seasons of the year. Tesserae. Tesserae, Richard. Yes, tesserae. I've got a drawer of it here. What you do is you shunt it around like that. Look at that. That's the 4 Seasons. That is the Great Plough. That is Snug and Cozy's rocket landing on Squodge. And that's the Bald Explorer's latest epic. Tesserae. It's like casserole, but much more solid. How are we doing? Where are we? I've completely lost my place now. A fine head of winter is to be seen at Bignor, a human face in a hooded cloak, wearing an expression of gloomy hopelessness, as if asking, "Is this weather ever going to improve?" The finest pavement shows a stately head, probably of Juno, flanked by peacocks, an emblem of immortality. Below the usual geometric borders is an interesting strip which shows 12 cupids playing at gladiators. Contender, ready? But the most interesting thing about this work, apart from its fine quality, is the nimbus or halo which Juno wears. Do you know, I was only thinking about that the other day. I should think that this is the only pre-Christian halo in England, apart from Simon Templar, of course. But who lived 18 centuries ago in this great house beside Saint Street? Was it Eric Pode of Croydon? Was it Gerald Smoth of Harpington? 2 characters from that very famous Burkus Way TV. Do you remember? Did anybody ever listen to the Burkus Way to Dynamic Living on BBC Radio 4? One of the finest radio programmes ever to have come out of that institution. The Burkus Way to Dynamic Living. Look it up on the Tube Reviews. It was a radio programme. Anyway, Gerald Smoth and Eric Pode. Eric Pode of Croydon. Sorry, it's just a moment of lax concentration. I was doing so well until then. I imagine it had an immense walled outer courtyard, rather like a large modern farm, in which there were stables, the barns, the farm wagons and the oxen. At the far end of this stood the villa, built round an inner courtyard, the rooms running 3 sides of the quadrangle. The house must have been elegant and rich. All the rooms were centrally heated by hot air from a central furnace which circulated beneath the floors and in the wall flues, and there was a fine swimming bath which was filled with heated water. In a remote and still largely barbaric island, the villa reproduced something of the ease and comfort of a Roman country house. Roman travellers on their way from London to Chichester have paused at its gates in admiration, anxious perhaps to present letters of introduction to the owner, hoping to be asked to stay the night there, or at least to have received in civilised surroundings for a while, and to have enjoyed dinner in one of the spacious rooms whose pavements have survived. It would be interesting to know who lived in that big house on the other side of Stane Street, but that, I suppose, we shall never discover. Eric Pode of Croydon. Mrs. S.E. Winbolt, the archaeologist, has put forward an interesting and likely theory that it may have belonged to Cogidubnus, the British chief of the Sussex tribe of Regini, who was so pro-Roman that he was allowed to retain his chieftainship. Can you imagine what England was like when the people lived in this house? I asked the woman. Well, they know how to make themselves comfortable, she said, in an almost Irene Handel-like voice, like a practical housewife, with their central heating and swimming pools and such like. Irene Handel, eh? No doubt they did, but I imagine that the comfort was unevenly distributed. I think if I could make a brief explanation into the past, I think if I could make a brief exploration into the past, I should choose to travel for a week or so through Hadrian's Britain. I should give much to see what London was like, what a country town like Silchester or Chichester was like, and what a British village was like. It'd be interesting to see where Romanisation ended, and to know if the peasants bore any ill feelings towards the upper-class Romanised Celts. I should expect to find wealthy landowners, townsmen and shopkeepers priding themselves on their Roman habits and fashions, assembling in the Forum, going to the theatre, listening to the Vogue show, even maybe trying hopelessly to cultivate the olive and the grape. But I should expect to find the British villagers still primitive and Celtic speaking and looked down upon, and possibly with a touch of patronising affection by the Romanised Britons of the towns. Perhaps some of the young upper-class Britons in a toga might be seen exploring the villages with the bald explorer, with the object of studying the folklore of his countrymen, or copying down for the delight of some of the sophisticated public the simple stories told around wood fires in stockaded encampments even. Mein Gott, it's windy outside, just reading the thing. Tesserae, to the great teapot stand, I remember, yeah. Never got made, did it? We must make that. If only we had a lockdown where there was nothing to do, one could do that sort of thing. While we were locking up the barns, I saw one of those unforgivable little relics of the past which are sometimes more revealing than pillar or mosaic. Firmly printed on a Roman tile and impressed upon it while it was still soft are two sets of prints made by two dogs 18 centuries ago. One dog, evidently a big fellow with long claws, stood with his front legs so closely placed together that his prints overlap. Facing him stood a smaller and lighter dog, for his pads had not sunk so deeply into the tile. The small dog stood with his weight on his left foreleg, and his right leg barely making an impression at all. Looking at these poor marks, I seem to see the picture clearly. The big dog, feet together, his head lifted, was skittish and playful, as big as dogs sometimes are. Came from Cambridge, with a lovely long leather lead, had a slight limp. Its fur had recently been clipped, The tag on the inside had been fallen off for some years, and he'd had a nasty cut under his lower leg where he'd been munching on the grass, and a small snake had bit him on the side. "Very good," said Sherlock. "You're improving your layers of deduction." "Yes, I am," said the man with no name, who wandered into the... Sorry, what happened there? The Linda Kane is going, What? None of that's relevant. That's not there. What are you talking about? He just started to describe this dog as if he was playing Sherlock Holmes. The small dog approached suspiciously, with one foot barely touching the ground, ready to run away if necessary. "I should like a naturalist to examine these prints and tell me if I'm wrong. I should also like to know what kind of dog made the deep marks. It must have been a Roman Alsatian, for it couldn't have been a Roman... What is that cross between the fluffy... Oh, I can't even remember. I can't do the joke because I can't remember the... What is the silly little fluffy... Oh, it doesn't matter. That, women used to have these funny little fluffy, and they used to, look like tufty... Poodle, thank you. Cockapoo is what I was going to say. Maybe it was a cockapoo. Anyway, looking again at the photograph I took of this distant encounter, I'm beginning to wonder whether the smaller prints may not have been those of a cat, or perhaps a mouse, or maybe it was a flea. Who can tell? Can this be a record of cat and dog friendship in Roman Britain? Or did the dog moments later eat the cat in one fell swoop? And did a Tyrannosaurus Rex come stamping down upon him? Looking at the villa, we retraced our way beside the feet of Weald, and high above us on the downs we saw an apple-green streak of Stane Street running into the distance as straight as a spear. I do hope they catch the culprits, and I can't remember the name. Sending love and hugs and for a swift turnaround. It was just a blue whale. It was a blue whale. That's what it was. Of course. Thank you, Ed. The name of Arundel is so fine a one and so famous in history that I've always imagined the town to be a busy place, full of life and markets, and perhaps even full of ships. But I came down a steep hill into a quiet little town lying in the shadow of a mighty castle. A river with a fairly stiff current, for I watched a young man trying to row his girl upstream, runs through the town, but there are no signs of cargo boats or barges on the Arun. There's somebody at the door. There is somebody at the door. I can't go to the door. I might just go to the door. I've got to go to the door. Just 1 second. Somebody at my front door. Hello, Andrew. It's in the box. Oh, yeah, no, it's all in there. I can't stop because I'm doing a live stream. No problem at all. Nice to see you. Isn't it funny? You tell people something, you tell them where it is. Somebody had to come and collect something. You tell them where it is. You still knock on the door. It's in the box. I told you, it's in the box. It's in the bloody box. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. You probably wondered what the hell was going on. So did I. Yes. So it is a river which is retired from business and now amuses itself. Let's just have a bit more gin, I think. It's a river that's retired from business and now amuses itself with punts and young men who... Punts? I can't imagine that there were punts on the River Arun. Surely the river is too strong for punts. Rowing boats, maybe. Anyway, we used to do a bit of trade in the old days, said a local inhabitant with a slightly bizarre voice. But now the port has gone, so has the market, and the town lives on the castle. High above Arundel, like a trumpeter on a hill, rises the tremendously embattled castle, in which lives the Earl Marshal and hereditary Marshal and Chief Butler of England, Bernard Marmaduke Fitzalan Howard, 16th Duke of Norfolk, Earl of Arundel, and premier peer of the realm. His Grace is a Roman Catholic, and about a third of Arundel's population of 2,700 also profess the old faith. But that is not, in my opinion, the reason why the town has a faintly continental look about it. The Calvinist, who hopes to see pale Jesuits flitting about and plotting in corners, or who expects to hear the groans of a tortured heretic greengrocer rising in the night, will be disappointed, for Arundel takes its faith with nothing of a convert's fanaticism. I have no idea what that means. No idea. I think the foreign appearance of Arundel, I wouldn't say it was foreign. Would anybody say that Arundel was foreign? I think the foreign appearance of Arundel is explained by three things: the way the town clusters around the castle, the French look of the church of Philip Neri, and the castle itself. It is only a faint resemblance to be noted in certain lights, as if Arundel might have had a French grandmother. The Howards are kindly and well liked in Arundel. They no longer come down into the town and sweep the men away to some inconvenient battlefield. I thought they meant they no longer come down the town and sweep the streets. They no longer come down and sweep the men away to some inconvenient battlefield. Instead, they present it with public buildings. An atmosphere of benevolence strays down from the battlements into the streets. The kinder side of feudalism still lives there, but who but a fool would deny that feudalism had its softer moments? The late Duke, who was once Postmaster General, gave the town its nice red post office. Is the red post office still in Arundel? It was late afternoon when I arrived, and I was told that the castle is not open to the public. Oh, but don't worry, because he knows somebody's bound to get in every bloody time he does this. It's getting a bit of a sick old thing. I want him to turn up. I wanted to look at the castle, so I knocked on the door, and they said, "Oh, go away. We don't want old hacks like you coming in writing a book about it. Now, just piss off, would you? Come on, we got to whitewash the kids." Or something. But that never happens. It never happens. It was late afternoon when I arrived, and I was told the castle is not open to the public until August, but whatever I did, I must see the park. Oh, so he couldn't go in. So late on summer's evening, I walked beside the Arun round the castle hill, and I came to a shaded and obviously enchanted pool near a bridge, and here was an entrance to the park. Some shifty little old man came out and said, "Oi, bugger off, we're closed. We don't want any hacks like you coming out here. Come on, we've got to whitewash the kids." Blimey. I walked for some time on the shores of a lake, a beautiful and natural lake with plenty of weed in it, where wild fowl were swimming with their downy families. The lake is fed by a number of springs which rise up within a few feet of the bank. They come oozing and bubbling out of the earth, discharging into the lake a quantity of beautiful blue water. It's the Blue Rinse Brigade from Worthing. And though I am no chemist, I wondered whether there was some nitrogenous springs, for the water is the same colour as the mineral water of Buxton in Derbyshire. I turned inland from the lake up a steep path through a majestic beeched wood, and soon the lake was lost to sight. I thought, maybe someone has pulled out the plug. The park stretched apparently for miles, a gentle undulating expanse of grass, and not so much glass, and tall trees. Herds of deer grazed in compact brown companies, slowly passing out. Bless them. Of the shadows. Oh, not passing out.
Oh, it's hot here, isn't it? It's hot. No,
they passed out of the shadows. They didn't pass out. Out of the shadows of glades to stand in the golden brown was Prime Minister. Oh, no, that was Gordon Brown. In the late sunshine. The Georgians did not dot the park with classical bowers? and its late owners have wisely left it to nature and the deer, which keep the grass as closely clipped as if a regiment of gardeners was at work on it. Behind the deer was a regiment of gardeners at work on it. If ever a foreigner asks me to show him something which is typically English, I shall run him over. I shall run him down to Arundel and walk with him through the park. I approached as close as it was possible to the castle, but I received an arrow in the heart and died in a horrible agonizing death. Ah! I wailed, until at last the last drop of blood had been passed through my heart, and now I have nothing more to... It's blank. I made that bit up. What? If a foreigner... I approached the castle, but little of it is visible. Although it is so famous in history, I am ashamed to say that I could remember nothing about it except the charming reference in Lamb's essay in praise of chimney sweepers. But whether the story of the sweep's little boy who was lost in the castle and discovered at last asleep in the ducal bed is true or not, I do not know. It was true, it was me. Nevertheless, Lamb went to the slaughter in New Zealand, wrote that the little creature had alighted upon his magnificent chamber and tried with his tedious explorations and was unable to resist the delicate invitation to repose which he saw exhibited. So creeping between the sheets very quietly, laid his black head upon the pillow and slept like a young Howard. Then there, of course, is the story of the North American eagle owls, which were presented to Charles, Duke of Norfolk, in the 18th century. The birds were encouraged to breed in the old keep of Arundel and became a famous sight of the castle. It was ducal fancy to give these birds the names of prominent politicians and other distinguished men of the time. One visitor was looking at the owls when the keeper, pointing to a singularly old and ruffled specimen, said, "We call that one Lord Eldon." Ha, 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 ha. Oh, yeah. "Oh, do you?" replied the visitor. "Well, I happen to be the real Lord Eldon." The best story at Arundel Owls is of the butler who gravely entered the breakfast room and approached the Duke. "Please, your Grace," he said, "Lord Thurlow has laid an egg." What do we got here? Let's have a quick gander. Peter Vorbs, Richard's arch enemy, of course. Hello, what's going on here? There's a few little things. So I think Richard's been kidnapped. Yes, that's true. They've sent in a doppelganger. I think most of us are aware by now that there is two of them. Oh, Richard was replaced by Peter Vorbs, the Peter Vorbs bloke. Still, there, bottom at the High Street, is the roundabout on the other side of the bridge. Oh, what, the post office? I think you're right, Ben. 2 for the price of 1. Buxton water. Yes, better than buxom water, I suppose. Is one the evil twin? I've never noticed, but just listening and looking at the screen, says Turbo Stream. I think there are 2 Richard Vobes. Poor Eric would have twice the archiving to do. Yes, that's true. One of us called Vobes and the other is called Sebov. Ah, yes. What is Richard backwards? Catch you all later. Must go. Sorry. Can catch up in the morning. Have a good show tonight. Work calls. No problem. Have a nice day. What have you been drinking today, Richard? Whatever it is, can I have some? Definitely happy juice. Oh, good. That's all right. Sebov is his Russian alter ego. If only I could do a Russian accent. Trev, compared to the last 2 days reading, this one is tame. Oh, yes, that's very true, actually. He's got to make some bread. See what I did? That's true. Almost like the Ravens of London. What, gone mad? I miss... the Ravens of London, are they named after famous lords and ladies? You missed so much, Richard, said Andrew. You missed so much. I missed them. I'm not sure. Lord Furlough, was he furloughed? How have you spelt furlough? Lord Furlough is spelt Thurlow. Thurlow, not furlough. After a night in an admirable new hotel near the riverside. An admirable hotel near the riverside in Arundel. I wonder if that is the what's the name of the inn down there? The Black Rabbit. I wonder if it was the Black Rabbit he stayed in then. I climbed the steep high street and saw the sights of Arundel. I saw the large, cold but impressive Roman Catholic church of St. Philip Neri, which was built by the late Duke about 60 years ago. The architect was that interesting person, Joseph Aloysius, handsome, who designed several fine churches, handsome churches presumably, and also invented and gave his name to the hansom cab, an invention which should have made his fortune, but I think he received no more than £300 for it. Opposite the Catholic church is the old parish church of St. Nicholas, which is, of course, Church of England. I've made a video about that church, actually. The Duke of Norfolk attends St. Philip Neri, but his Protestant Duchess attends the parish church, whose vicar comes from her parish. And interestingly enough, there is two chancels in that church. One that is deemed to the Catholics with a gate that you can't go through from the peasants' side, and the Protestant version for the peasants to abide by the rules of the land. Before the Reformation, the parish church was served by a college of secular priests, and in the chancel of this church the Dukes of Norfolk were buried. When you enter the church today, you are at once struck on the head by an iron bar, somebody hiding behind the door, I imagine. Or you are at once struck by the peculiarity that the chancel is cut off from the body of the church by a fine medieval iron screen, which is backed by a hideous modern brick wall. The screen was always there, but the brick wall dates from the famous quarrel between the Duke of Norfolk and the vicar of that time, the Reverend G. Arbuthnot, a quarrel which ended in a celebrated law case of 1879. So, yeah, all right, so there was only one chancel, but that's what I meant. He's got the chancel end, hasn't he? The Duke was a remarkable man and was the first Catholic layman since Sir Thomas More to play a distinguished part in the public life of England. It's a curious and interesting reflection on the swiftness with which religious toleration has come into the country, that as recently as 1860, when the late Duke was a boy, Roman Catholics were not allowed at Oxford or Cambridge, although apparently they were allowed at Oxbridge. He was, I used to think Oxbridge was a place, an actual place, and that was only fairly recently. He was, that doesn't surprise you, does it? No. It should do, but it doesn't, unfortunately, surprise me. He was educated under Cardinal Newman, who founded a nuisance saying, "Can you get out of my hassock every 10 seconds?" At the Oratory, Edgbaston, Birmingham, and throughout his life championed the cause of his fellow Catholics. The quarrel with the vicar turned on the relationship of the Fitzalan Chapel to the rest of the church, of which, architecturally, it is, of course, a part. They were both hot-tempered men, said the verger. "They're hot-tempered men." There we are. Told you he said it. Describing this last clash between Puritan and Cavalier. Neither of them gave a brass farthing for anybody, but... Neither of them gave a brass farthing for anybody, but the Reverend Arbuthnot angered his grace one day by referring to Fitzalan Chapel as the chancel of his church. Do you see the meaning of that? Why, it meant that if it was part of the church, the screen ought to come down and the chapel... You can't leave him there, Mr. Derrick. Ought to be on the other side of the parish church. So, what did the church do? What did the Duke do? In order to make it clear to the vicar that the chapel belonged to him and not the parish, he took workmen there one night and, working all night through, bricked up the entrance as you see it today. And what did the vicar do? The next night he got workmen and knocked down as much of the wall as he could in the time. So then the fat was in the fire. The case was heard in 1879 and the Duke won it. Yeah, the Duke won it. It was proved that the FitzAlan Chapel was the private property of the Dukes of Norfolk, the Dukes of Hazzards not yet managing to get their cars in the car park. But the vicar appealed, and again he lost the case. And so here we have a church without a chancel, or at least a church with a chancel that doesn't legally belong to it. And on the eastern side of the partition, masses are sometimes said for the souls of the Howards, while on the western side the screen is of a Church of England. The screen is a Church of England. That's what the verger said to the choir boy. Can you get out of my cassock? I bet he did. I bet he isn't wearing the slippers, this Peter Vorbs. Yes, I bet he isn't wearing the slippers. This can't be the evil twin. No cat sat on his lap. Purr, purr. Wow, this Alistair Cook was ahead of his time with the Dukes of Hazzard. Certainly was. Cool, blimey. Where did I get to? Oh, you're here. It was fortunate to be in Arundel on a morning when the FitzAlan Chapel was open to the public, knocking at one of the lodge gates. I was taken by the lodge-keeper's wife into the burial place of the Earls of Arundel and Dukes of Norfolk. I entered one of the most wonderful tomb chapels in England, a place that, though it was badly knocked about during the Civil War, is still the loveliest thing to see in Arundel. I know few burial places in which the fear of death seems less present.
You will die in here when I lock the door and come back in 5 years.
Oh, I'm not frightened. I'm not frightened at all. I'm terrified. The nobles of Arundel, separated by many centuries and social distancing, ended up with the Duke of Norfolk lying with their feet to the altar, resting on the FitzAlan horse. Their heads are on marble cushions and their hands are clasped in prayer. The South Chancery, which was built about 1498, is one of the most beautiful tombs in England. Petworth marble has been carved to resemble the finest lace. In the centre of the chapel, surrounded by a screen of medieval ironwork, lie Thomas FitzAlan and his countess, the daughter of John, King of Portugal. They died in the 15th century. She is sculptured in her best clothes, a horned headdress on her head from next, a gown sewn with pearls from Marks and Spencer's clothing department, and the tight sleeves seamed with pearls from Topshop. The guide told me that when a requiem mass is celebrated, 10 candles of unbleached wax are burned on 10 prickets of the screen which surmounts their tomb. Nearby is the grave of John FitzAlan, who lost his leg and died at the seas of Beauvais in 1435. For centuries there was a mystery about his body. It was brought home by a man called Elton John, who demanded 1,400 marks, which the family refused to pay. Elton therefore kept the bottle. Sorry. He kept the bottle next to his toddle. Elton therefore kept the body in pawn for a number of years. I'm not even going to crack the joke. And it was not definitely known to have been redeemed. and it was not definitely known to have been redeemed and buried in the family vault until 1859, when the tomb was opened and the bystanders saw the old warrior lying there with one leg. Phew. I must get a new bottle. Is this still the same? This is... Oh, yeah, no, we got into chapter 4, didn't we? Yeah, that's right. I remember now. How are we doing? The real Richard head tilts right. It tilts... Oh, my goodness. What are they going on about? I've just noticed the glass in the corner. I thought we had some glassware with Richard's face printed on it. I'd buy one, says Andrew Norris. Yes, if you go to baldexplorer.com, I've now got glasses with my face on it. They look like this. But that doesn't work. Does that work better? No. Old William Camden, writing about Chichester, said, "The city hath 4 gates, opening to the 4 quarters of the world." I like that fine flourish, which seems to link the homely outskirts of Chichester with Treeboysand and Samarkland. Although the gates have gone, the 4 main streets of Chichester are called North, South, East and West Streets, and you will not find a better example in England of a city that has planned 18 centuries ago by legions of Rome. The American gridiron cities, which we think so modern and sensible, were of course the rule in the ancient world. No Greek or Roman would have been surprised by New York. Alexander the Great built Alexandria 300 years before Christ, just as a modern American architect would do, and all the Hellenistic cities of the period were designed on the rectangular principle. When, therefore, did the winding street and the narrow alley begin? I remember once sitting among the ruins of Ephesus, looking at the marble bones of the old city which lie under the grass and the shrubs. Shepherd boys were wandering through the ruins with their goats, and I noticed that as the animals wandered here and there in search of grass and herbage, they trod winding paths which cut across the plan of the city. I have an idea that goats and sheep are the architects of the medieval lane. When the Romans left this country, the defenceless inhabitants of the cities fled or were massacred by the Saxon war bands. As the marauders were pastoral people, they feared and disliked cities and preferred to see them fall into ruin rather than face the claustrophobia of life within the walls. They built their villages around in the fields, but nevertheless adventurous herds must have wandered curiously about in the cities with their animals, as they do today in Ephesus. It is not possible that when the cities were reoccupied, the new streets were not the Roman streets, but the winding paths and shortcuts made by sheep or goats? Or am I just making this up and sounding like some silly old toff who's written a book? Yeah, I think the latter, actually. If there is anything in this theory, cities like Chichester can never have been entirely ruined or deserted, because their Roman street plan is too perfect. Either citizens with Roman municipal education survived to carry on through the Dark Ages, or the Saxons conquered their dislike of a town wall and consented to live within it. As soon as I entered Chichester, I felt it to be a comfortable and friendly place, which I should like to visit again for a longer time. So far as physical appearances go, it would seem to have a greater affinity with Gloucester than any other town in Sussex, although I had only to listen to the people who crowded the narrow pavements and entered the shops, not yet, thank heaven, entirely chain stores or combines to realise that Chichester is to West Sussex as Lewes is to East Lewes. Let us hope that nothing will persuade Chichester to remove its wonderful market cross, the best in England, planted in the very heart of the city, where the 4 points of the compass meet. It stands in what was once the middle of Roman Regum, the beginning of that North Street, which, as soon as it left the gate of Reginum, became the famous Stane Street, that flew to London over down and across the Weald as the crow flies. It reached London Bridge, a little over 50 miles away, with a divergence of only about 1.5 miles. What a marvellous engineering feat this was! The dignity and the pride of Chichester resides in its cathedral, a huge mass of worn elephant-coloured stone, lifting itself from the grass on the west side, on the side of West Street, where, I wonder, did I gain the impression that Chichester was small and uninteresting compared with other cathedrals? I was surprised to learn that it has a great total length. I was surprised to learn that it has a greater total length than Exeter, Hereford, Worcester, Lichfield, Chester, Ripon, or Southwark. It has one unique feature: the only detached cathedral belfry in England, a tall 15th century tower in the northwest corner of the churchyard, which visitors may enter and ascend. Suspended in the darkness there you see Big Walter, the hour bell, which weighs 7,400 weight, and a peal of bells of various ages, the oldest bearing the date of 1583. As soon as I entered the beautifully kept cathedral, I was impressed by its extraordinary width. The nave is 19 feet wider than those of Westminster Abbey and Canterbury Cathedral, and with the exception of St. Paul's and York Minster, it is the widest cathedral nave in the country. This peculiarity is caused by double aisles. I've seen these in old churches which have been enlarged to accommodate an expanding parish. How exquisite is the calm dignity of the architect, chiefly Norman, of this church. And how fortunate is it that no one has blocked the view with a hideous organ. You can see straight down the church from the west door to the east window. Behind the high altar, I saw the place where the shrine of St. Richard of Chichester used to stand, at one time a great place of pilgrimage, as famous almost as the shrine of Thomas of Canterbury. An inscription in the retro choir says that St. Richard's body was moved there from the nave on the 16th of June, 1276, in the presence of King Edward I and the chief people of the realm. Richard's life is proof that violence and murder print a name on the future more securely than goodness and sanctity. Most people can tell you something about Thomas à Becket, but few could describe the life of Chichester's bishop, who was the most saintly character of his time. Unlike so many earlier churchmen, he was not a statesman. He was just a good and pure man who, though he was a bishop in his materialistic world, lived like one of the apostles, very similar to Richard Vobes. Perhaps he is the only Englishman who might be compared with St. Francis of Assisi. He was called Richard de Witch, or Richard de Deutwich, for he was born in Deutwich in 1197. He was elected Bishop of Chichester when he was about 48, but his see had been ravaged by Henry III, who had confiscated the estates and declined to restore to him the temporal rights, or to put it more bluntly, the money. Undeterred by this, for no man ever cared less for money, Richard tramped Sussex for 2 years, staff in hand, visiting his clergy, comforting the sick and doing what he could for the poor, gaining the love of all by his humility and simplicity. His great friend was Simon, the prince at West Tarring near Worthing, a man who shared his meagre possessions with his penniless bishop. And it is said that those who worked in the fig garden at West Tarring, which still exists, and it is said that those two worked in the fig garden, which still exists. It is the only fig garden in England, I think, which still bears a grand crop of figs in good years. I don't think it does now. St. Richard Vobes of Worthing, that's the very same one. A charming little booklet about St. Richard Vobes of Worthing by Caroline M. Duncan Jones is sold in Chichester. They don't sell very many copies because nobody's ever heard of them. More about St. Richard has been sold. And from it I learned that when he was a little late in rising, the bishop would listen to the birds and say, "Little birds of heaven, irrational though ye be, ye have been before me in singing your praises to God." When he was eventually restored to the state of bishop, Richard continued to live with the simplicity of a hermit and of Eric.
That's right, sir.
He was obliged to entertain and keep a cook, but he ate sparingly and seemed to have a positive horror of meat dishes, preferring tins and takeaways. Sometimes, unable to control himself, when luscious dishes were carried in for his guests, he would apostrophize bird or joint with the words, "Poor innocents, what have ye done worthy of death?"
We poked out your mate's ears.
Oh, that's all right then. He was a cause of some anxiety to his steward, for he was always giving away his money. On one occasion he went to see a prisoner in jail, and on his departure took good care to leave the door open. He was always descending upon the unfortunate steward, ordering him to sell something and give the proceeds to the poor. "The horse I ride is better than I need," he cried one day. "Sell him, I beg, and let Christ's poor be fed with the price." Soon after Richard died, he was proclaimed a saint. His festival on the 3rd of April was one of the most important feasts in Sussex until the Reformation, when his shrine, which pilgrims had covered with gold and silver and jewels, was dismantled by the order of Henry VIII and the treasures removed to the Tower of London. Caroline Duncan Jones gives the odd piece of information that the honour in which St. Richard was held at Droitwich, his birthplace, survived the Reformation and existed until Cromwell's day, when a Puritan Parliament sternly forbade the people of Droitwich to decorate St. Richard's well with flowers and branches of trees. We're nearly coming to the end now, ladies and gentlemen. In the cathedral, I came across a memorial to the first person who died in a railway accident, William Huskisson, MP of Chichester, who was run over by the Rocket in 1830 at the opening of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. The unfortunate man left his coach to speak to the Duke of Wellington, who was in another coach, when the Rocket, dashing past on adjacent rails at a good 12 miles an hour, caught him and drew him under the wheels. That was a red letter day, wasn't it? A memory of Chichester which will not easily fade is of St. Mary's Hospital, where my son Stanley... Oh no, St. Richard's Hospital is where my son Stanley was done. This perfect medieval building is now a charity which supports a few old people, unless they've got COVID-19 and have snuffed it. The hall, with a magnificent timbered roof, was once a sick ward, and the room was so arranged that while patients lay in bed, they could see the priest at the altar of the adjoining chapel. Another of Chichester's sights which interested me is the Minerva Stone. It is built into the outside wall of the council house in North Street. It is a Roman inscription which was dug up in Chichester in 1723, taken to Goodwood House, where the Duke of Richmond built a classical summer house in its honour, and brought back to Chichester in 1907. It records the fact that an unknown Roman whose name ended in enti and whose father was Purendentus had given land for the building of a temple. Eager theorists have jumped to the conclusion that the name ending in enti was Pudenti, and that this man was the Pudens who married Claudia and is mentioned in the St. Paul's epistles. And who was Claudia, they say, but the daughter of Cogidicus, I'd said it earlier, I can't say it now, of Chichester, a British chief who was so pro-Roman that he had a daughter, that if he had a daughter he would certainly have called her Claudia in compliment with the Emperor Claudius. Well, who knows? It's a pretty story, and it is pleasant to think that a blue-eyed Briton born and a Roman who lived in the Chichester may have been among St. Paul's first converts. It's a lovely little story. But that's it. We're up to chapter 5, ladies and gentlemen, in which I buy waistcoats at Midhurst in a storm of rain, move to Surrey at Farnham, where they have lost King Charles' cap, and cross into the hop garden of Hampshire, where I see how sheep hurdles are made. I visit Alton and White's Selborne. And that is your lot for today. Thank you very much. £5.50 if you don't please pay on the way out. The silver platter is being passed. Phew! How about that? Animals were actually starting to come back into the towns during those first weeks of lockdown. They've now been shooed out, I imagine. Mike Stevens says, I wonder if he used the train to travel around. Yeah, that's true. 1939. It looks outside the cathedral, which you can see the road. Michael says, can't be you, Richard. You don't ever seem to go to bed. No, I don't seem to. I am very tired. The Andrel screen was reinstated in 1961. Sussex Day is on St. Richard's Day, 16th of June. EDGEDOBRUO. Cogidubnus. Oh yeah, Cogidubnus, that's right. Dobnus. Codgetator. Codgetator make up his mind. Cogitor. Yeah, anyway. I need to make myself a cup of tea and light the SE. Thank you very much for coming along today and enjoying all of the nonsense that we've been parading in front of you. I hope it was of some interest. Back again this evening on the Vogue Show channel at 8 o'clock. I have edited a version of my so-called long format video. It's not long format. It's long. It's far shorter than longer. Cod and chips twice. Yes, okay, that would be nice. Yes, tomorrow's video. It's still nicely produced, but it's not as long or anywhere near completed. And the weather changed. And I couldn't do the second bit. And the wind has been just absolutely appalling. So I've edited it up and I have presented it to you for tomorrow, but that's that. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for all your very kind words. Thanks, Richard, and everyone. I hope you enjoyed the little bit of ad-libbing from time to time. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. That's very kind. Otherwise, I will see you anon. Take care, one and all. Thank you for joining me. Next time, ta-ta. Ta-ra, as Audrey says. Ta-ra. Toodle pip.